Welcome to STEAM Powered, where I have conversations with women in STEAM to learn a little bit about what they do and who they are. I'm your host, Michelle Ong. My guest today is Kate Kirwin. Kate is a passionate advocate for women in STEM and the innovation ecosystem. She founded She Codes, a community that supports women in tech and who want to get into the tech industry. Join us as we talk about Kate's journey to STEM, She Codes, and building community in tech. Welcome, Kate. Thank you for joining me today on STEAM Powered. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today all about your journey.
Thanks, excited to be here.
Wonderful. So, you didn't actually start out in STEM, which is very cool. You started out in international relations and business law. But what motivated you to get into that area to begin with?
Yeah, so when I look back at the things that motivated me, kind of all the way through my life, my fundamental value is making a difference. And in school, I always thought that that was going to be through politics. I love politics. A little more disenfranchised now than I was back then. But back then, I was like, oh my God, I can do things. Now I feel like there's better ways to do that. But anyway, so I started there and I did really, really well in school. I got really good grades, kind of flew through the traditional education system. And everyone was telling me, they're like, oh, you should study law. And I'm like, but I don't want to be a lawyer. And they're like, but it's just a good thing to do. And I'm like, but I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to make change and I don't feel like I can do that through the legal system. They're like, just do it anyway. I'm like, no, I'll take a bit of a step back. And that's what we tell young people all the time, right? Like, just do it. It's a good thing. It looks nice. It's smart. You're a smart person. So I took a year off and I started working full time at a property management company, just doing like basic office stuff. And I really loved working. And I've worked since I was 14 at Kmart and then at a cafe. And then this was my first office job at 17. And there's just something for me really fulfilling about like getting stuff done and ticking things off and being part of something. So work was really important to me. When I did go back to uni, they couldn't keep me on in that full-time role. So I lasted, I think, 2 weeks in just doing university full-time, but it was like 3 days a week before I got super bored. I'm like, someone needs to employ me. I need to fill my day because I just can't do this like 3 days a week studying and not being part of something. So I started working in events for Multiple Sclerosis Society through like a friend of a friend, and did events for 3 years while I was studying. And then we got to the end of that, and I wanted to go back to doing something full time. I really wanted to be back in the city. This was literally like my decision making criteria was needs to be in the city, needs to be full time, and hopefully in events because I've done that for the last few years. And I ended up at Spacecubed. So Spacecubed, for those who don't know, it's a co-working space here in Perth. And when I started, we were a lot smaller. So we were one physical space. We had 4 staff and about 300 members. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary recently.
Oh,
We've now
awesome.
got about 20 staff, about 3,000 members, plus an extended community of many more than that. And we do stuff all around Australia. But yeah, that was really my first experience in the kind of STEM space. And I just got really curious. So I was working in events and really liked doing that. But I went along to every event that we were hosting, all the meetup groups, all of the panel discussions, like literally everything, because I was just like a sponge for what's happening in the space. And that's kind of how I got into doing stuff with She Codes, because I was just really curious about technology and coding and trying to teach myself. And then it kind of all spiraled from there.
But it's so cool that just developed this like through osmosis, this fascination for programming. But where did you see yourself going with developing these technical skills that you hadn't previously explored?
I never never really had like an ambition or goal for it. I was just really curious about learning how things work. And I think how that comes for me, like reflecting back now, I don't really know if I saw it at the time, but the things that I love are creating things. So I love baking, I love painting, I love even like building communities and building business. It's like seeing something coming from nothing and turning out into something. And I think that that's what drew me to tech in the first place, because you've just got like a bunch of random words and then suddenly you've got a beautiful website. And that like nothing to something was what really inspired me and excited me. I'm still not a developer, so I still only do like this much code myself, and I've got people who do the rest of the teaching and supporting from a technical experience. But I think having a basic understanding of how things work, and just being kind of swept up in the magic of being part of something that is going to be the future, that's what's really exciting for me.
That is fantastic. And it's such a great way to, come up with an idea that lets you found something that's so huge. So, what, instead of just pursuing this on your own, what made you make it into this community, into this kind of space that, other people can get involved with?
Yeah, so I really was just trying to solve my own problems. So I was trying to figure out how to teach myself how to code, and I went down the rabbit hole of online tutorials. And you get in a tutorial loop. Where do you go next once you've done something? Trying to get to the next thing. That's kind of where I was, and I started a Learn to Code meetup, which was just the blind leading the blind, a bunch of people who were also learning stuff, just coming together and learning stuff together. And the first couple of those, I had some really weird experiences of these people being like, oh my God, I'm such a beginner. I've only been coding for 15 years. And I'm like, cool, nice. Um, and then around a similar time, like I was going to all the meetup groups, and everything was going like way over my head, tons of acronyms, tons of experiences where I was the only woman in the room, and sometimes even the only person wearing color. Like everyone was either black, white, or grey, sometimes blue. And then I'm there in like hot pink, and everyone's like, what are you doing? This is what? You're in heels and hot pink and wearing black t-shirts and jeans. This is our vibe. So I'm in a space that I'm
Why not have both?
comfortable. Yeah, right. And it's different now. Like it is a bit different now. Um,
Mm,
the last couple of meetups I've been to have, had women, and had a more diverse range of people, which is really exciting.
how novel.
Um, right? Um, women? What? Um, but yeah, at the time I was like, this is, I should feel comfortable because this is my office and these are people that I know, a lot of them are my friends, and I still feel a little bit like, ugh, am I supposed to be here? Do I know enough to be here? Am I like good enough to be here? And if I'm feeling that, and I know a lot of these people, like how is someone brand new to the community going to feel in this kind of environment? But then a lot of it also sort of happened by mistake. So, or not mistake, I guess, happy coincidence and accidents.
Serendipity.
Yeah. So there was a guy in the community, Marcus, who really wanted to run something for women. And he didn't want to be the face of it, and also just didn't have the events experience that I did. So he was like, hey, can you help me out? I want to run this thing. What do you think? And we did the first one together. We formed a bit of a committee, about 4 or 5 people who were also really passionate about doing something in that space. We ran as a committee for a couple of months, and then a lot of them all moved away. And then we're at this point of like, do I let this die? But there's so many people who want there's so many people who want it. I'm getting emails, I'm getting wait lists of people trying to come to these events. And then I got a cold email from BHP who were like, hey, we really want to we're a bunch of white guys sitting around a table talking about diversity. We should probably go talk to some women. Can you help us like create our diversity strategy? And can we come along and learn from you and come along and mentor, and then maybe give you some money, and then see how we can do more stuff together. And all of that was kind of happening at the same time, and I'm like, I can't let this die because
Yeah.
you
There's
know, we've
so
got
much
all of these,
interest.
yeah, and I'll just keep going and just see what happens. And then now we're 7.5 years later and have taught 6,000 women. So clearly, people still want to do this.
That is amazing. So, what? Well, we should rewind a bit. Tell me about, or tell our audience about She Codes and what this organization does.
Yeah, so what we do 3 different levels of programs at the moment, a 1 day, a 1 week, and a 6 month program to get women from that beginner level. I know nothing about technology, I know nothing about code, right through to junior developer ready by the end of the 6 month program. We operate at the moment across Perth, Brisbane, and we just launched in Sydney a couple of months ago. We're running our first program there in September. And we've done some smattering of stuff across regional Western Australia. And we're doing a program in Ipswich in regional Queensland as well. And so, what we're really passionate about is how we can provide opportunities to people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to get into tech. So, the statistics, only 29% of tech is currently female. Um, and there's a huge problem in creating role models for women. Possibly, you know, why stuff like this exists that we can talk about role models in tech. Um, but what I'm really passionate about is how we can kind of fix both the talent problem of getting more people into tech, but also just creating those tangible role models in industry that are women who come through my program to inspire the next generation of people to come through, and also giving opportunities for people who are mentors to be better at mentoring and promoting and being allies within their companies and their industry as well. So we're kind of tackling the diversity problem on a couple of different levels, but really about providing those tangible opportunities on like an impact first basis.
That's amazing. And it's great that you're getting industry involved with this as well, because, that's the problem area that you're trying to solve. And a lot of people need that kind of access and no, and they need to be able to know that there is a way in somehow,
Mm,
either through networks and connections. And people forget about the fact that networking is a big part of doing this kind of work. So
yeah.
having all of that together is such a great package.
Yeah, so I think we sit in the middle of education, community, and industry because I think you really need all of those 3 things
Yes.
to really like, especially to career change. So predominantly our audience
Mm,
is like 20 to 50 who are looking at career changing, but that's really intimidating on your own without having all of those 3 things. And unfortunately, I think
yeah.
the formal education system can't do community well and hasn't to date done industry very well. They're very good at the education part, but we're even seeing people coming out of university or other formal education, and they're like, "I don't know anyone. How do I know what a good job is, or how do I, you know, talk to people about culture, or who do I go to ask for help when I don't know something? How do I do all of that stuff?" So yeah, we're kind of building community for those kind of people, as well as giving people the skills that they need to actually have the confidence to career change. And a lot of it is confidence, and it's providing opportunities. Because I get told all the time, like, oh, if women wanted to learn how to code, they just would. I'm like, okay, that's not the point. It's not. That's not the barrier. It's everything else that's the barrier. It's not the desire that's the barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of groups for women in tech where I have seen, or women in STEM in general, where I've seen they're saying they want to be able to explore these other fields and these other areas, but because the traditional education system focuses you down one particular field, one particular stream, if you do want to kind of explore these other opportunities which can augment your current field, there's a lot of independent learning, and for a lot of people they don't know where to start because they've come from this traditional education structure. Whereas now, a lot of people are trying to come through independent learning or through informal education systems, and all these other ways of being able to get into communities that they're not immediately involved with from their foundation fields.
Mm.
So yeah, giving that information and that knowledge and that understanding of how to get that foot in the door or who to talk to start with to get involved in community is such an important part of it. It's very cool.
Thank you. Thank you. I do feel
Yeah.
very lucky, right? Like I get to be I feel like I get to be surrounded by these incredible people, both our students and our mentors. And I genuinely consider a lot of them to be like my closest friends. And they're all so inspiring and they've got such cool stories. And I just get to be like this little part of it. And they tell me that I'm changing their life. And I'm like, I don't know, like you're all super cool anyway. And I just get to be part of that amazing journey with all of these people.
That is amazing. And it's so cool that the range of ages that you've got coming through this community, 20 to 50, that's massive. So you've got everyone
Yeah.
coming from, early career through to late career in other spaces, just, trying to find this way in. Do you have any stats on the kinds of areas that all these women are coming from?
It's a little bit of a varied, and it kind of depends on the different programs that we run. So the 1 day
Hmm.
workshops, we've actually had, I think 5 was the youngest that we had at the 1 day workshop, and the
Wow,
oldest, I
that's
didn't
cool.
ask her age, but she was somewhere in her 80s. And we've had a couple of times that we've had 3 generations of the same family coding together, which is like
Nice.
so cool because they all understand different pieces of the puzzle because of
Oh,
their
that's so
kind of
cool.
experience in technology and how things work. For our 1 day workshop, I think there's a lot of people who work on the fringes of tech. So they're actually all of our programs. There's people who work on the fringes of tech. So they're in like digital marketing, or they're in product, or we've had a few people in the 6 month program who are like in testing, or um, those tech adjacent roles or technical roles that aren't pure dev work. And they're really
Mm,
curious because they've been exposed to bits and pieces of it, and they've like played with a bit of HTML but haven't been able to kind of get their hands dirty and building it themselves. So we get a lot of those people in
yeah.
our community. um, for the 1 day workshop, we get quite a lot of mums who are like, I just want to understand what my kids are doing at school and help them
Oh, that's
better.
cool.
We get a bunch of people who are like just a bit scared about, is my job going to get automated? Am I going to get replaced at some point? I feel like I need to keep up. So I'm doing a bunch of programs to keep educating myself so I can stay abreast of different trends and feel like I can be more, yeah, be better at my job in the future. Um, and yeah, then there's people who are just like, I'm really curious and this thing keeps being thrown around and I don't really know why I'm here, but I'm just here to learn something and see what happens. And industry wise, yeah, it's pretty broad too. Um, Obviously, in Perth, we get a lot of people from mining because that's mining resources, because that's a lot of the people that we have here in Western
Our
Australia.
industry.
Um,
Yep.
and we do a lot of work with companies like BHP, so that makes sense. But we've had a, kind of everything as well, from like lawyers and accountants, people in HR. We've had quite a few people from like a HR background, like really fundamentally understand people, but haven't kind of had the other side of what the technical side looks like. And one of our alumni, she was actually BHP as well. She was from a HR background, learned the technical skills, and then moved into the secondment into the technical team and was building a
Nice.
product for HR because she was like, I understand all of the problems of
Yes.
why this system wasn't working. So now I'm the best person to be able to solve that problem. So yeah, it's pretty broad. And I think I hear a lot of times from people, oh, I don't know if I'm smart enough, or maybe I'm too old to be in tech. It's normally like women in their 30s that are like, I'm too old. I'm like, really? Like,
What?
really? Really? Um, Totally not too old,
That's just mind blowing. Yeah.
right? Um, like I don't know, maybe I can't judge because I'm still 28, but still, it feels
Maybe in
wild
two
to,
years you'll change your mind about this.
yeah. Like, oh my god, I'm suddenly old. Um, but yeah, there's this perception that you have to be like 20 something and this like nerd in a dungeon and be super crazy smart. And yeah, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't know, I'm fun and I like wearing color and I'm in my 30s and I didn't study physics. Like, maybe I can't do this. Um, but like looking at the women who've come through our program and the ones who've done really well, like, I don't know if any of them fit that stereotype of like a guy in a basement. That, like writes
And
lines of code.
yeah, and that's such a fascinating kind of stereotype that we still have. And it's the kind
Mm.
of thing that was popularized in the 90s, and yet it's still an image that a lot of people hold in their head today. Even though, you have popular culture showing you all the cool nerd girls and the girl hackers, and we still, you know, return oddly to the guy in a basement. It's, yeah, I
It's
find
super
that
weird.
fascinating, but
I even had a
yeah,
couple of years ago, I had someone write an article about me in like an online newspaper, and the feature image that they chose to use was a guy wearing a hoodie with ones and zeros behind his head. And I'm like, the whole article, we're talking about women in tech, we're talking about me, we're talking about like literally all of this like glitter and sparkles stuff. And the header image that you've chosen is black and blue with a
hackers.
guy in a hoodie hacking with ones and zeros. Like, I've never written binary. I don't know if I ever will write binary. Like, how do we get here? How do we get here? And there was
And how do
only
we get
like
away from that?
that was only a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know where that whole stereotype comes from and why that's still a thing. But if we can kill that,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
It's just so strange. Like, you look at the way that, it's the kind of image that they portrayed when cyberpunk was a thing in, 80s and 90s films, and you had that literal image. And then you've got things like The Matrix. But, all of the things since then, yeah, we've moved on. And yet somehow these are the stock images that still end up being used
Mm-hmm.
all the time because, you know, they expect that people reading the article will go, oh, this is an article about computers. And then
Mm,
we'll kind of take it from there without giving you any additional context or scope for what you could be talking about in terms of the field or the kind of people in it. Yeah.
yeah.
So
I
bizarre.
have lots of thoughts on this space.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely due for a
Would you like to share them?
rebrand. The whole industry needs a bit of a rebrand, and just a closer connection from like what's actually happening to, what are we talking about and what are we portraying. And yeah, I do think that television and media has a lot to answer for in how we've created that narrative and that stereotype. So I'm really passionate about how we can promote, the real people from diverse backgrounds and share their stories and do videos and things like this, these kind of recordings of like, yeah, I'm just a normal girl that hula hoops and wears pink and like, you don't have to be that kind of guy. um, yeah, I think the more times that we can tell that story, I just wish that we could get it from like a bigger external factor as well, so it's not just people like you and me doing this work, that it's coming from Hollywood and coming from our big news providers as well.
I think the news probably has a lot to do with it because popular culture and television and film, I think, are doing a little bit better with that. We're getting a little bit more scope. It's not just the goth girls who are in the code. And although they are very cool, the goth girls are very cool. Um, so, we're getting more into this space where they're starting to see that we do look a bit more normal, or normal has a wider range. And yeah, it's just we just need to get the media on board because that's is clearly the demographic that needs to be hit, because coming in from outside listening to you talk about this is like, I don't get that image at all. I don't see that. The people I interact with, the people I work with, the people I see and people I speak to in STEM are so diverse in
Mm.
everything, in all aspects of their lives. We have layers. And yet clearly, your experience with this is totally different, and that's just blowing my mind because I thought we were past this.
Oh, like, don't get me wrong, I know
Yeah.
probably 300, 400 developers across
Yeah.
Australia. A bunch of them are like, yeah, literally my closest friends. And I have not met a single person that
Who makes the
codes in a
stereotype?
basement with a projector with lines of code washing over their face while they're hacking into a bank. Like, I've not met a single one of them. And I think that I probably know, like, at least in Perth, I think I probably know almost every developer. Sometimes someone comes across my like LinkedIn that I don't know, and I'm like, how do I not know you? Like, that's weird. I feel like I should be at least connected vaguely to almost every developer in Perth, and probably most developers across Brisbane as well. But yeah, none of them fit that stereotype. So that's the weird disconnect for me. Like, we've got all of this tangible evidence of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and yet the broader community still comes to me of, oh, but I don't know if I'm that guy. So I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah. And it's also, yeah, coming in from, peripheral tech or even non-tech at all completely, it does seem like this foreign exotic thing. And because this is challenging, coding is not hard. There is an art to it, but I think anyone can do it. You might do it badly, but it can be done.
Hmm.
So it's one of those skills where you develop and you refine those skills, but it's not something that's out of the reach of most people,
Hmm.
because if you can follow instructions, if you can give instructions, you can code. Like that's literally what we do. We are giving instructions to computers, and even then they don't listen sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's that, yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like it's getting people into that mindset of programming looks weird, but it's no weirder than learning a language, like a
Mhm.
spoken human language. And it's just understanding the nuance and its syntax and being able to, for me, I feel it is an art. It is a way that you can express yourself in just a different medium. And if you can express yourself, you can code. So that's my little bit of philosophy right there. But
Yeah, I've got like
yeah, it's getting that image to other people.
yeah, so Hayley Stewart, who has been a long term mentor and teacher for us, she always says, so computers are really dumb. We're way smarter than computers are, because you need to tell them exactly, specifically what you want it to do, because
Yeah.
otherwise it doesn't listen. So when people are like, oh my God, computers are magical, like, no, 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 they're really dumb. They're really, really, really dumb, because we need to give them very explicit instructions. Yeah, so the second thing that I got told recently is that Michelle Sandford from Microsoft, she's amazing. She's definitely look her up if you haven't come across her already. She said to me, and a bunch of people at our workshop, there's no such thing as technical people and non-technical people. There's just people who have had the opportunity to develop those skills and the people who haven't had that opportunity to develop those skills. And that's really all that it is. Like, have you had the chance to learn how to code, or haven't you haven't had the chance to learn how to code? And it is, like you just said, really just like learning a language. And I say that to my girls all the time. Like, you wouldn't expect to learn English, like, well, English if you don't know like English already, but French or German or Spanish, you wouldn't expect to learn that in a day and feel like, oh my God, I'm amazing. I can totally fluently speak everything. You're going to need to Google it. And it's the exact same thing for code. Like, you're going to feel really dumb while you're learning it, and you're probably going to need to keep learning and Googling and practicing. Um, but it's exactly the same. It's just learning how
Yep.
the different formats and structures work. Computing computers are really dumb. So I think it's even
Yes.
easier than translating between languages, because there's all these nuances in language and there's 7 different ways that you can say the same sentence. But computers are really dumb, so that makes things easier. There's usually a correct way.
Yes, exactly. And, it's, yeah, it's one of those things where you just get better at it as you keep doing it. There was this tweet I saw the other day. It's like, I'm really offended that I have to be really bad at something before I get good at it. And it's just like that. It just comes with practice and with exposure and learning and talking to other people doing that sort of thing too, and learning with you. And it's so accessible. We just need to let people know that it is.
Mm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so with your the longer programs, the 6-month programs that get people ready for getting into industry, how do those programs work?
Yeah, so when we were designing the program, we were really looking at like what are the barriers that exist and how do we do it radically differently. So how do we kind of flip everything that we know about how education works and traditional models and try and make it as female friendly and accessible to the demographic of people we're working with as possible. So what we developed, so it's 6 months part time outside of business hours. So we do at the moment Tuesday nights and Saturday mornings. 7 hours a week contact time, plus probably 5 to 10 hours in their own time. And everything's project based. So we do five projects over the course of the 6 months, kind of one per language, learning HTML, CSS, Python, Django, Django REST framework, and React. And then they come together in a collaborative group project at the end of the program, working out how to work in teams, sharing their code. We give them a client who, throws them a curveball every now and again, because that's what clients do. And you have to kind of get used to reporting back to a client on the status of the thing that you've made and kind of presenting back your work. Really just trying to simulate a real world environment, but in a friendly environment. And then what's really important to me is that community vibe. So during classes, a lot of pair programming, working with other people, and we do stand up at the beginning of every session, sharing kind of what your update for the week is and what your goal for the week is. We do some guest presentations on women in tech to get some presentation skills and develop confidence. And then we do a bunch of social stuff as well. So, like some drinks or some game nights and bits and pieces. We've got this thing that we call the cupcake effect. So, the cupcake effect is really important to me. The cupcake effect is how something makes you feel. So, all of our events have had cupcakes at them, which again happened sort of by accident. We used to have this lady who used to make cake, who used to do all of our catering, and she stopped catering. So then we just had like boring sandwiches and lunch. And I'm like, we need some kind of cake because it's cake. So we made, I just decided on a whim to order cupcakes with our logo on them. And then people were obsessed. And now, again, we're 7 years later and we keep doing these brand cupcakes. But the cupcakes make people feel like they're at something that's for them, and there's effort and thought that's gone into it, and there's the glitter and the sparkles, and like it looks good on Instagram, and yeah, it's like more meaningful and more effort than just like a random
Your
biscuit.
standard sandwich tray.
Yeah, so that's our cupcake effect, and we kind of translate that into everything that we do, so that you've got that like the fun and the glitter and the sparkles, because learning is hard, and we just said that coding's really easy, but like sometimes things are really hard, and you are using a
Yeah,
lot of
there's a
brain
learning
power.
curve.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
some weeks that are just challenging, and a lot of our women have full-time jobs, they've got families, and they've got
Yes.
lives, so there are tears along the way. I think every cohort has had at least half of them cry at some point. I've cried, our mentors have cried. Like it's fine. That's like how we build those relationships together. And there's some really strong relationships that have formed from my girls post program, which I really love, because you're not only developing those technical skills, you're also learning soft skills, building confidence, and building connections both within your cohort and with your mentors. And so every sessions, our class sizes are typically sort of like 20 to 25. And we have three mentors plus the what we call our lead mentor, which I guess in a traditional that would be your teacher or your lecturer. Um, uh, but yeah, there's all of those people surrounding, helping out from a technical expertise, but also sharing a little bit of their journey and what their job is like and what they do on a day-to-day basis. So over the course of the program, the girls have met about 18, I think, mentors from different industries and different backgrounds and different education experiences, plus the 25 girls that they've come through the program with, plus learnt all those technical skills. Yeah, so that's kind of our program in a nutshell. We're on to, I think we've done 6 cohorts now across Perth, Brisbane, and we did one up in Port Hedland, in the far north
Nice.
of WA, which is a bit of a challenge. So we had a little small group up there, and everything that we do at the moment, COVID pending, has been in person as much as possible because we think that it's really important to build those relationships and have that kind of human to human interaction. So we were flying people up to Port Hedland to teach in person, and then
Very
doing
cool.
like a couple of weeks online and then flying someone up again, because that bond is really important in what we do.
It is. And I love that you actually have that focus on the soft skills as well, because again, in the traditional educational environment, like you get to meet your classmates, you get to meet the occasional industry person who comes in to do a talk. But in my experience, and don't know how much or whether it has changed since then, but networking opportunities were always a little bit vague. And even
Mm,
if they did offer them, it's like, well, why am I going there? What is my reason for doing this? What value does it have for me? And being able to convey that it's not utilitarian. Like you are building connections, you are building networks, but the networks aren't just to serve a function. They are, to create your group of people, your tribe, or your, whatever you want to call it, so that, you've got people to bounce things off. You've got connections to share ideas with or job opportunities with. And it's so much more about building those friendships than it is about building specific purpose connections with people saying, well, you have to be of use to me before I will connect with you. And
yeah.
yeah, that has, I think that's changed a little bit over time, but people still have trouble doing that because it's hard making friends, especially when you're an adult. Creating new connections, creating new networks is a challenge, and you have to actively, do it to make it happen. It doesn't just passively
Mm.
occur like when you were a kid at school.
Yeah. And there's even just like a time thing, right? Like you need
Mm,
to invest a lot of hours with someone to form that kind of relationship. And in a lot
yes.
of places, like when do you get time to spend at school? You're spending every day with someone, so you kind of have to figure out who you like and who you don't like. But
Yep.
outside of a work environment, uh, yeah, like where when do you spend that much time with someone outside of work, or perhaps a hobby that you do really regularly? So it's really
Yeah.
challenging as an adult, especially when you're busy and you've got, a full-time job and family and everything else. Like, yeah, how fitting in the time to invest in those kind of relationships. And if you're career changing, then find
You have to build a whole
relationships
new
at
circle.
work. Yeah, like that's not helpful,
Yeah.
probably, depending on
Yeah.
where you work. But like if you're a lawyer, making friends with your other lawyer friends, like probably not going to help you get a job in tech, hey? So then where
Yeah.
do you go? Like, do you go to the meetup groups? But yeah, how do you get that first step in to forming that kind
Yeah.
of relationship? Yes, that's really interesting how you kind of tackle that.
It
And
is. And
through things like
yeah.
this, there's opportunities to do that. But on a broader level, kind of how you build community and make that happen. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And it's a trend that's happening now that a lot of these initiatives that are coming out are focusing on the community aspect, making sure that people know it's about the community and not just about the specific purpose that they've come together for.
Mm,
And that is such a valuable thing to emphasize, and not just because of COVID, because now people are being more aware of having to create connections and relationships with people because it's been harder to do that remotely. So yeah, it's good that we're able to focus on those kinds of skills and teach people to be people again.
yeah, it's super important.
Yeah,
Especially, yeah, in the
it's
last
very
couple
cool.
of years. And it was interesting in 2020 because we had a conversation with our program partners of, this whole pandemic thing's happening. Should we just put the program on hold and just like wait it out and see where we're going? And, maybe we can kind of check back in a couple of months when everything's kind of calming down. This conversation was probably maybe April, May 2020, where we really had no idea that, wow, we're 2 years
Yeah,
later and we're still doing this. Cool. But anyway, we went and surveyed our community and we're like, hey, what do you want to do? And overwhelmingly, people were feeling like what they desperately needed was human connection, even if that was
Mm,
on an online environment. Having access to community was really important. And now more than ever, they were worried about jobs and staying relevant and having skills. So deferring the program was actually like the worst thing that we could do for the people that we wanted
yeah.
to help, because what they needed was what we can offer. So we took that back to our program partners and we're like, hey, like this is overwhelmingly the response that we're getting. I think that we've just got to make this work. So we went to a online delivery model for 6 weeks in Perth, and we did 9 weeks in Brisbane, and then kind of slowly transitioned back into having in-person classes. And then over the last couple of years, we've just had like on and off weird things as everyone's had to do. You go week by week, day by day. I think for a while there, I was watching press conferences in 3 different cities, just to stay ahead of what was happening from a COVID perspective, in all of the different states we operate in, which is a little wild. But anyway, I think we're hopefully somewhere closer to, I don't know.
Transitioning back.
Some days I feel like we're getting there, and then some days I'm like, oh no, we're spiking again. Maybe we aren't.
Yeah. So what sort of things did you do? Like, obviously you have your remote classes, but how did you maintain that feeling of community when people were so used to having that in person as part of the whole program?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things that we chose to do. So we're really looking at, like I was saying before, about the cupcake effect, how we manage that. And so one of the
Yeah.
things that we decided to do for the 6 month program, we were actually posting stuff out to people. So I posted a cupcake kit, because I couldn't give them
Oh,
physical
nice.
cupcakes. So I sent them like icing and the mix, and decorations, in our color scheme. Um, Really over engineered, but they had cupcakes. And the first session, they were actually on a Zoom call together. They had to bake their cupcakes and then ice them in, half of the room were icing them uh, live on the Zoom call. And then they had to explain to the other half of the room how they decorated them, using very specific instructions. And the other person had to replicate it using the same ingredients they had in their cupcake kit. And then we had a little bit of a discussion about how computers are really dumb and you need to be very specific, because giving instructions, if you're not very specific, can sometimes result in a completely wild result that you didn't intend to do. We did stuff like that. So trying to take computer science concepts and make them fun and make it interactive, and having those physical props and stuff, making people feel like, they still had access to cupcakes. We also really leaned into the fact that, we are at home, so let's celebrate that. And Hayley was really good at this. Every time at the beginning of the session, show and tell your pets. So go and grab your cat and wave it in front of the screen and tell us about your cat and what they did today. If there's a child walks past on screen, let's stop the class for a second and let's say hi to the child. Like let's not use this as this awkward, like, oh, we're in people's houses. Like, let's use that
Yeah.
as an opportunity to get to know each other as people and stop pretending like it's this weird thing that we're here, and use it as a bonding experience. So, yeah, really thinking about how we can still work with people as people. And then using lots of like chaotic breakout rooms and things on Zoom. So in our classes, we had the main class, and then when we did some like peer work, splitting into breakout rooms, we had the panic room, which is where if you need a one-on-one with a mentor, you can go in the panic room. If you wanted some quiet time, then you could go to the library. And then if you just wanted to go in the main room and hang out with other people and have some like loose conversation, and then yeah, you could kind of move around between those different rooms just like you would in a physical environment. So
Yeah.
yeah, we really thought a lot about how this would work. And like, I still don't know if we nailed it. Like, I think there's probably every time we do things, we get a little bit better. But I think a lot of people just went into online delivery as like, let's do exactly what we've done in the classroom, but do it on Zoom.
Yep.
And that doesn't work. like it just doesn't work.
No.
You need to really be mindful about how you show up, how you deliver content, how you have breaks, how you make sure people go outside, how you make people feel connected, checking in a lot more. And then, yeah, for us, I think having those physical things that you still felt like you were connected, and you still got the same experience, even if that's a cupcake, that was really important.
Yes, it is. And I think you guys did such a great job from what you've described in trying to make people feel more comfortable about this remote environment. I've been freelancing since 2008, so I've been working from home and doing this kind of thing for ages. And when all of this kicked off and there was this panic about, oh my God, we have to do things from home, we have to do things remotely, I felt a bit smug at first because it's like, yep, it's okay. You guys have this. It's totally all right. Don't panic.
Mhm.
But, a lot of people, because they haven't had that environment before, it is such a massive change for them because they have this bleed of space between work and home life. And a lot of people don't know how to manage that. And
Mm.
they panic because I can't let people know what I'm like at home. This is really quite, personal and invasive. But you are human beings. And when you're in the office, you interact with each other as human beings. Even if it's in a professional environment, you talk about stuff that you do outside of work sometimes, or your family, your pets, or whatever. And you can still do that at home just because you're doing it over a screen. It doesn't mean you're still not human. And,
Mm.
you don't have to forget that you are interacting with real people on the other side who've got real lives happening behind them, literally.
Yeah, 100%. I still like, when I can, I like to come back into the office. I really like being around
Mm,
people, and I still like the separation of just sitting on the bus and listening to music. And
yep.
like, I know it's a bit of a like it's a waste of time, but that commute really kind of separates things for me. Of like now I can like shut off and calm down. Sometimes even when I work from home every now and again, and then I find myself at 6 o'clock at night being like, oh, hang on, I'll just do that one thing, uh, such a trap. Um,
It
because
is.
that one thing turns into more than one thing, and then suddenly you're like, "Oh my god, I haven't eaten today. What?"
Yeah,
Um, but anyway, so I still like coming into the office, but yeah, I think how we can, I think there's a lot of lessons that we've had to teach each other on, how we show up. And in some instances, I think people have developed superficial connections with people through this online environment, but I think in a
yeah,
lot of ways people have developed like really deeper meaningful conversations, and relationships through this, just depending on how they've structured those relationships and how they've like shown up, and what their trust and psychological safety has been within the organizations or the groups or whatever that they've developed.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like trying to encourage that interaction aspect that's more social when you are on
Mm,
these remote kind of mediums. Because, someone mentioned to me the other day that when you are in an office and you're gathering for meeting, you've got that period in the beginning where not everyone's there yet, and you just sit there talking and chatting and, just bantering back and forth. Whereas when you're in a Zoom environment, you feel obliged to kind of sit there quietly. Or,
mhm,
if you're having that banter, it's hard to have the banter because everyone can hear you at once. You can't hold individual conversations because it's basically a brawl where
mhm.
everyone's talking at once over top of each other, and you can't create that sort of connection in the same way. So, that is a very interesting aspect that I think a lot of people missed as part of this workplace meeting environment.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen I saw on LinkedIn probably a few months ago now, studying people's like brain activity waves of back-to-back meetings in physical meetings versus virtual meetings. And
Mm.
you're like, brain is so much more stressed going back to back virtual meetings, because you start the call and you're like, okay, cool, it's 10:01, let's get started. Whereas in a
Yep.
in-person environment, often that's like, oh, it's like 5 past, most people are here, like I guess we'll just start. So you miss those couple of minutes, plus all of the banter, plus the like physical getting up and moving to a different room, gives you your brain time to like calm back down before it has to ramp back up to now I've got to focus on the next thing. So yeah, it's really interesting. This article is looking at how we need to make sure that we're meaningfully doing more breaks, and actually having time between online meetings, because it is so much more stressful. And also just looking at yourself, you're like self-criticizing by looking at yourself on camera. Um, because you just can't
Yep.
help it. Like it's human nature to look at yourself. So yeah, there's
Yep.
that like even if you're not consciously doing it, there's this like a little internal narrative of like, oh, hang on, my lipstick looks weird, or like, oh, look, my hair's gone to that different place, or like, oh, does my nose really look like that when I move in that direction? Um, which you just don't do in a normal environment because you're probably not sitting in front of a mirror.
Exactly. And yeah, it's definitely a thing where everyone's suddenly very aware of their presentation. And it's you take for granted how aware you are of your presentation until you're having to look at yourself in a camera all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, so get to those bonus questions.
Ooh.
And what hobby or interest do you have that is most unrelated to your field of work? And I think we've already covered a few of them.
Yeah, so I do a lot of things. I'm definitely known for being very busy, and I really like being busy. So yeah, I do a bunch of random things. Probably the randomest, and the thing that I should probably talk about the most is I'm a hula hooper. So I actually met Bree, my hoop teacher, at Spacecubed way back in
Nice.
2014, 2015. She was a member in our space. She said to me a couple of months ago, she's like, do you know what? I actually thought that you just came to classes because you felt bad and you liked me and wanted to hang out with me. And I'm like, I kind of did. Like, I genuinely do like you and wanted to support your business. So I came to classes. But then I just found it really fun and did that for a couple of years, took a little bit of a break, and now I've been back probably seriously, I'd say, for about 2.5 years now. Um, and I teach as well. So I teach a hula hoop fitness class.
Nice.
So I've done a couple of gigs. I did a New Year's Eve street performing. Did some stuff for Christmas and Australia Day. I've done some markets. And I was teaching a class over summer down at the beach of beginner level hula hooping. And now I'm going to 2 classes a week. So yeah, I hula hoop. It's kind of random, but very fun.
It
I also
is.
do, I've been going to Jungle Body the last couple of weeks because, again, I think exercise should be fun. And so, like, yeah, why don't we have lights and music and a DJ and the lights off and, yeah, have a lot of fun with it? Like, I'm definitely not the kind of person who can just, like, go for a run. Like, so boring. I need some other kind of stimulation to exercise and dance and have fun with it. And then, like I was saying before, like I really love creating things. So I bake a lot as well. I actually don't know that I really like eating cake. I just really like baking cake. So I love celebrating people's birthdays and making cake. And I've done a bunch lately. And one of my friends has been insisting that I film when I bake for Instagram. So I've been creating some like Instagram reels of cake videos just for her the last couple of months too, which adds a whole nother
That's
layer
awesome.
of what we are talking just before about being self-critical, like trying to figure out how to keep the
Yes.
kitchen clean while also making cake. I am not a clean, organized. I'm a very organized person except for when I'm baking things, and then there's like flour everywhere, and the whole floor is covered in icing sugar. So filming has been an interesting time for me, trying to learn how to do that stuff.
Just throw caution to the wind. Keep your flour everywhere. It's fine. That's still
Yeah.
Instagram worthy.
Yeah. It's still like it's been a couple of weeks since I baked and my floor is still sticky. And I'm like, why is my floor sticky? I've mopped like 5 times and there's just still like patches of stickiness from all of my icing sugar. Um, yeah. How I roll.
That's fine. That's fine. Just get a dog. You'll be fine. Cool. And which childhood book holds the strongest memories for you?
Oh, so I was thinking about this question, and I actually saw this book the other day that's still on my bookshelf. I have this, it's quite a thick book, like it would be like a few hundred pages, and it's about fairies that live in flowers, and it's almost
Ooh.
like like an encyclopedia picture book kind of thing. So there's like a big image of what the fairy looks like in the different flower, and then it tells you about the flower, and then like the story of what the sugar sugar drop fairy does, and uh, where she lives and how she hangs out and stuff. Um, and yeah, that was like one of my favorite books when I was very young. And it's still on my bookshelf. So I was looking at it the other day and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a bit of a blast from the past, looking at all of these different fairies. And I'm sure that I had favorite fairies from it, but I would have to go back through my book and figure out which ones were my favorite fairies. Because I'm pretty sure I had like two or three that were like, these are the, I'm sure I had a reason of like why they were the best fairies. But
Of
I'll have to
course.
come back to you on that.
That's okay. I love those books though, the encyclopedic kind of fantasy book. Like you had the dragon ones or the squashed fairy book when squash fairies were really popular. And just being able to break them down almost into these little illustrated manuals of all these specimens was
Mm.
such, I loved that period where everyone was doing that. I thought it was very cool because it made you think about fantasy in an entirely different way, in like a almost very kind of scientific kind of look into the habitat and David Attenborough kind of thing. It's very neat.
Yeah. And like I think because it was such a big book, and it's like an
Yeah.
A4 kind of size one as well. So like
Mm.
tall and thick. But because it wasn't like a story, you could read a page, or you could read
Yeah.
10 pages, or you could read 50 pages. And then when you come back, you could look at those same 3 pages, or you could look at different ones, and you can kind of chop and change a little bit, which is kind of
Yeah.
nice. Especially when you're younger, not having to
Mm.
just commit to I'm going to read the 600 pages of Harry Potter start to finish and not put it down, and then when I'm done, I'm probably not going to pick it up again for another 2 years or whatever because I finished that story.
Yep.
This you could kind of like go at your own pace and pick it up and put it down again.
Yeah, exactly. And the ones that I liked the most were the ones that were almost like anatomy books. So they talk about, this is the wingspan of of this particular dragon, and you can see that it's made of this sort of material or skin, and they talk about all these little bits and what makes it unique to that particular species. And yeah, it was just one of those things where you could just pick it up, look at it, and often they had these beautiful illustrations or watercolors or drawings to go with it, and you could just kind of appreciate that for a little while, and then go to the next one and put it back down again. Yeah, this was
Yeah,
great.
100%. Love. I love, and I've always been, a big fan of glitter and sparkles and the very feminine things. So I had a my 6th birthday party. It was a fairy Queen Caroline, and so my mum made
Nice.
me this fairy dress. So very into that whole thing. Um, and now like probably don't hang out with fairies as much anymore, but like give me a reason to wear glitter, and like I'm there. I don't even need convincing to wear glitter. I'm there. Just sign me up.
Just run the next workshop in full glitter and fairy costume. I mean, why not?
Oh, don't tempt me. Don't tempt me.
Do it. Yeah. And lastly, what advice would you give someone who'd like to do what you do? And or what advice should they ignore?
Yeah, so my number one piece of advice is like it never hurts to ask. So especially in this space, there's so many people that are so generous with their time and experience and introductions. Like I've had coffee with people and they're like, oh, there's these 11 people that you're going to have to meet. I'll do an email intro for you now. Obviously, be respectful of that. Like, you've got to come
Mm.
in prepared and you've got to be really specific on what you want and like don't harass people because people are really busy. But yeah, a lot of people think that, oh my God, that person's so busy and fancy, they won't reply to me. But the worst thing that you can do is get told no. And even no is often not really no, it's a not right now.
Yeah.
So never hurts just to ask, and just be on someone's radar, particularly if you're new to the industry. Um, I think in the startup space, the best advice that I always give is you really need to understand your customers and talk to your customers and be obsessed with your customers as much and as often as possible. And I think that I've been able to do what I do is because I really deeply, fundamentally understand my community, and I talk to them all the time. And a lot of them, are like me. And I think I've been driven a lot by what they've been telling me that they want. There's obviously a little bit about what I want as well, but a lot of it I do because of the feedback that I'm given. So just really understanding that. I think there's a lot of founders who are like, oh, but I've got the best idea since sliced bread, and I'm going to go spend thousands of dollars on developing it. And I've not talked to a single customer, and I don't know if anyone wants to pay for it. But it's fine because I know that it's amazing. And then they build the thing, and then they go and try and sell it, and people are like, yeah, no one wants that. Why did you make that thing? So
Yeah.
definitely understanding customers, particularly before you spend any money, getting to know exactly what your customers want. Advice to ignore, I think feedback is a data point. So I think feedback is a gift. Even bad feedback, like it's still good to know. It's so much better to know than to not know. But feedback is still a data point, and at some point, you can go down this feedback loop. And I've seen that particularly in startups in the early days, where they're getting pulled like in this direction, and this direction, and this direction, and this direction, and have lost sight of what their end goal is because they're just following blindly everything that people tell them to do. So I think sometimes, you need to take on feedback. Don't ignore feedback, consider it, and then be like, does this align with what I want and where I'm going? Or is
Mm.
that something that I can be like, that's interesting. That's good to know, but maybe not right now. Maybe I'll just keep that in the
Yeah.
back of my mind as that was a really good thing that Michelle said to me, but I don't think it's relevant for where I'm at right now. I'm going to try this thing. And then if I get that feedback again by more people, like, okay, cool. Now I've got all of these data points telling me there's a big flashing red light. Stay away from that. But sometimes that one piece of feedback is an outlier, and you can just
Mm.
ignore that one piece of feedback as an outlier. Yeah, I think particularly for beginner stage startups, and particularly for women who want to be people pleasers, that gets people in a bit of a loop of getting disconnected from what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it.
Absolutely. And it's such an important thing to be humble enough to receive the feedback, but critical enough to understand which ones to kind of take in and which ones to let go. And it's such a hard skill to learn because you do want to take everything personally. You do want to act on every bit of advice and bit of feedback that you get, but it doesn't always apply. And learning to kind of say no when it doesn't apply is, yeah, it's super hard. It requires practice.
Yeah, 100%. And it was actually really cute this week because I asked for feedback from a couple of people that I really respect. And something that was kind of vaguely relevant to them that I thought that they would give me good feedback on. And one of them said to me, he was like one of my mentors. He was like, "Kate, I just don't think that I'm qualified to give you this advice because I trust you and I know that you're going to make the right decision. And like you're way closer to this problem than I am. Like you understand your community, you understand women, you understand like all of this stuff. Like I'm just here to support you in whatever you need. So I'm not qualified to give you advice on this." And I'm like, oh, that was really lovely. Like, not super helpful for what I wanted, but like also really validating to know that, he believes that whatever I decide is going to be the right thing to do. So, I think even when you're giving other people feedback,
Non-advice.
giving
Yep.
giving a little bit of like, maybe this is my opinion, but like this is why this is my opinion and this is my bias and this is where I'm coming from in this. And like sometimes I'm not the most qualified person to give you feedback. But I'll give it to you
Mm.
because you asked for it, but take it with a grain of salt sometimes.
Yeah. Also, a very important lesson in giving feedback.
Yeah. Like, does this person want this feedback? Is this useful? Am I the best person to give this feedback? And are they
Mm,
going to blindly follow everything that I say? Or do I know that that person can synthesize it into like, it's a data point? Really important things
exactly.
for giving feedback. But yeah, feedback is still, it's a gift. So we should keep giving
It
feedback,
is.
positive and negative,
Yes,
both gifts.
that's right. Exactly. Yeah, and yeah, it's all stuff that we need to learn to give and to receive, and it's super hard to kind of be able to do it in constructive ways and in ways that we
Hmm.
know will be received and in ways that we know will be helpful. So yeah, like knowing when not to give the feedback is also a good thing to learn.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
any of this is helpful to anyone, but like, there's all of just the things that you
No.
need to know.
No, it is. It's
Layers,
all
just
useful
layers.
things. There are layers, and it's a lot of things where people take things for granted through life all the time. There's always information that we think we know or we think we don't know, and sometimes there's always these little bits of info where it seems like common sense, but you don't realize it is until someone says it.
Hmm.
So, you know, people always, say, ask for feedback. It's like, but how do you give feedback? A lot of people don't know
Mm.
how to give feedback, but they're always asked to ask for it. We're always asked to do it because, it's useful information to have. Like having feedback is important, but we don't know how to process feedback and we don't know how to offer it. And they don't teach you these things and you have to learn it on the fly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's
I
all
think
good
maybe
information.
giving feedback regularly, I think helps you learn how to accept feedback too, because you
Mm.
can give something and see how somebody else processes it, and then sometimes even ask for feedback on how you gave the feedback, um, just to really get in
Yeah.
like feedback inception. Um, then I think that that helps you then later, like, oh, okay, last time I was giving that person feedback, this is how they took it. They took really
Yeah.
well. These are the things that I did. Um, when someone's giving me negative feedback, like, oh, I know I don't need to take this personally because Michelle didn't take it personally when I told her that I didn't like X thing that she did. Um, yeah. So I
But
guess if you're not good
yeah,
at
it's all
not
about
good at accepting
refinement.
feedback, try and give some.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is about refinement and asking, was this feedback helpful to you? Is also good for you. Like you are getting feedback back, but it's it's understanding better the person you're giving the feedback to so you can give them better feedback next time. And yeah, continuous improvement.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Okay, well, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. Like, I have
Yeah.
loved speaking to you about your journey and all the stuff that you've learned about the community and the people who are wanting to get into code and just, don't have the confidence to give it a try because they don't understand that the space can be welcoming and that it is inclusive and diverse and we don't have to fit a specific stereotype in order to be able to get into this room, into getting into this interest and exploring all these very cool ideas. So if people would love to know more about She Codes and the work that you do, where can they go?
Yeah, so our website is shecodes.com.au. So we're She Codes Australia on basically every platform. So She Codes AUS on Instagram and Twitter, and She Codes Australia on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn at Kate Kirwin. And I've got this beautiful new headshot that Josh Fernandez took where like my hair's got this whole Beyonce swishy thing going on. So um,
Wonderful.
if you try and connect with me and you think that my headshot's amazing, Josh Fernandez, best photographer in Perth. Love that guy. And it's new. So that's fun. You can feel free to connect with me there. I do encourage anyone who is interested in like maybe just dabbling. You can join our Slack community. So we've got about 2,000 people on our Slack community. There's a bunch of stuff that happens on there. We've got a careers channel for jobs, general information, events happening around town, stuff like that. We've got some help channels. So if you are learning how to code, you can ask a question there in HTML and CSS, React, Python, Django, or you can ask just a random other question and someone might know the answer. We've got about 300 mentors across Perth, Brisbane, and Sydney who are all hanging out on that Slack channel. So it's usually not more than 12 hours before you get an answer to a question. And like, I think we're way more friendly than like Stack Overflow. So if you are learning how to code, feel free to jump on there. The link to it, I can send it to you to
Yep,
pop in
put
the
in
show
show
notes.
notes. Yep.
But it is also on our website, in the top, in the social section. There's a link to join Slack there too. So, yeah, you can
Amazing.
jump on our Slack channel. Feel free to reach out to me. I did say that it never hurts to ask. So if there is anyone out there who needs a bit of a pep talk, feel free to reach out and see how we can pep talk your way into joining tech.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kate. This has been absolutely wonderful. And yeah, I hope you have an incredible day.
Thanks, you too. It was a blast.
I've loved speaking with Kate about her passion for supporting women in tech and the programs that SheCodes offers to women who are tech curious and want to explore the tech and dev space. It's also wonderful to learn that these programs make coding accessible to women and girls of all ages, and not just to those exploring careers in tech, but to parents who want to better support their STEM kids. To learn more about Kate and what we discussed in the show, or to connect with us, please visit the STEAMpowered website at steampoweredshow.com. You can also find out more about SheCodes at shecodes.com.au and social media, and Kate on LinkedIn, the links of which will be in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please let me know. Subscribe to the show, leave a comment, and share this with your geeky or geek curious friends. You can also support Steam Powered on Patreon and Ko-fi and the Steam Powered Show, the links of which will also be in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.